Hello friends, you've just unlocked another chapter of the past, hidden, untold, and waiting to be discovered. This is Buried Truths. Let's view the video.
Henry VIII was once a charismatic warrior king, admired across Europe. But his final years were marked by horror, decay, and agony. This is not just the story of a monarch's death, but of a powerful body turning against its master, until even the King of England begged for release. In his youth, Henry was athletic and handsome, a skilled juicer and hunter. But by the end, he weighed over 400 pounds. His ballooning weight made it impossible for him to walk. He was carried around on mechanical chairs, and his legs could no longer support him without excruciating pain. Henry's enormous girth led to frequent infections. His waist measured over 54 inches, and movement became unbearable. He wore padded armor and had to be hoisted onto horses with pulleys. His former image as a noble warrior had vanished, replaced by a grotesque figure hidden behind thick robes. The king suffered from an open leg wound that refused to heal. It oozed constantly, smelled foul, and left trails of pus. Doctors applied ancient remedies, including boiled cloths and pus-sucking ointments. Nothing worked. The ulcer became symbolic of his decaying body and the kingdom's moral and political rot. His suffering intensified in private. Henry screamed from his chamber in the night. Courtiers whispered of his groans, his frustration, and his humiliation. Once a fearsome king, now he could barely stand to be seen. He ordered rooms built closer to his chamber pot. He couldn't walk across a room unaided. He developed fevers and migraines, possibly linked to diabetes or Cushing's syndrome. These conditions worsened his weight and his moods. He was constantly angry, short-tempered, and delusional. His courtiers lived in fear, not just of his decisions, but of the horrifying image he had become. By 1546, Henry's health was visibly collapsing. Physicians avoided speaking the truth. The king's legs were dying. His body reeked. His mind clouded. Yet no one dared mention death. The king who once ruled Europe through strength now decayed from within, slowly, painfully, and beyond salvation. Henry VIII's physical suffering was only half the torment. His mind, once sharp and ambitious, was consumed by guilt, betrayal, and obsession with producing a male heir. His 6 wives, 2 executions, and failed marriages haunted him, fueling paranoia, spiritual fear, and emotional collapse in the final years of his reign. His first wife, Catherine of Aragon, gave him Mary but no sons. Desperate for a male heir, Henry broke from the Catholic Church to marry Anne Boleyn. This act triggered the English Reformation, plunging the kingdom into religious chaos. The burden of these decisions weighed heavily on his soul. Anne Boleyn, once his beloved, gave birth to Elizabeth, but no son. Convinced she betrayed him, Henry ordered her execution. Her ghost would later haunt his dreams. Many courtiers believed his nightmares and rage were punishment from God for spilling innocent blood. He became spiritually unstable and feared divine judgment. Jane Seymour finally bore him a male heir, Edward, but died days later. Henry mourned her more than any wife, yet even her death added to his torment. His joy over a son was eclipsed by guilt and fear. Was his dynasty cursed because of his sinful path to secure it? Later marriages, and of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr, brought political complications and heartbreak. Catherine Howard, his teenage bride, was beheaded for adultery. This devastated Henry. He became erratic, distrustful, and emotionally broken. His court became a prison of silence, where even loyal servants feared his wrath. Henry's obsession with legacy turned toxic. He feared Elizabeth and Mary would plunge England into war. His paranoia deepened, and he began rewriting wills, switching heirs, and executing nobles. His mind, once filled with strategy and statecraft, deteriorated into anxiety, guilt, and a desperate desire to control the future. By the end, Henry trusted no one, not his wives, not his counselors, not even God. He saw shadows in every corner. His conscience, poisoned by betrayal and violence, offered no peace. The king who once defied popes and armies now lost a daily war within his own tormented mind. As Henry's health deteriorated, his physical pain became unimaginable. His festering leg wounds transformed into gangrene, emitting a stench so foul it cleared rooms. The once great king was now a prisoner of his own rotting flesh. No armor or crown could hide the horror decaying beneath his royal robes. The leg ulcers had plagued him since a jousting accident years earlier, but by his final years, they turned monstrous. His legs were wrapped daily in bandages soaked with pus and blood. Surgeons cut away dead flesh while Henry screamed in agony. His chamber became a place of pain, not power. The wounds would reopen and fester constantly. The stench filled the palace halls. Courtiers avoided him, and doctors hesitated to touch him. Clothing stuck to his wounds, and removing them tore off flesh. The royal court whispered in disgust behind closed doors, fearing the monster their king had become. Henry's mood shifted with his pain. When his ulcers flared, he became violent, barking orders and accusing even friends of treason. His body and mind were linked in torment. His paranoia grew as infection spread, and servants were forbidden to speak of his condition or even show signs of pity. His bed had to be reinforced with iron to support his weight. He lay sweating and growling through nights, sometimes delirious. His sheets were stained with blood and bile. Few dared enter the royal chamber except for physicians, who risked their own safety in the foul air of the dying king. Treatments included cauterization, herbal poultices, and vinegar washes, none of which worked. Some whispered that black magic had cursed him, while others believed divine punishment had begun. Henry, once feared across Europe, was now feared within his own walls, not for power, but for the horror of his presence. The court carried perfumes and herbs to mask the rot. No amount of incense could cover the odor. Even ambassadors complained of nausea when summoned. Henry VIII, once the epitome of royal glory, had become a walking corpse, still living, still ruling, but already decomposing before his final breath arrived. As Henry's body collapsed, so did his mind. He ruled through fear, executing nobles, friends, and even family. His paranoia consumed him. Hallucinations and violent mood swings became common. Ministers vanished overnight. The king's palace was no longer a place of governance, it was a chamber of dread and blood. Henry trusted no one. Those once closest to him, like Thomas More and Thomas Cromwell, were executed under suspicion of betrayal. He signed death warrants like routine paperwork. Even his final queen, Catherine Parr, narrowly escaped execution. No one felt safe under a king ruled by fear, rage, and delusions of betrayal. He imagined conspiracies in every whisper. Servants were arrested for minor comments. Nobles fled court or remained silent in his presence. The aging monarch now wandered mentally, reliving past wars and imagined plots. He talked to shadows. At night, guards reported hearing him shouting at figures who weren't there. His hallucinations became legendary. Some claimed he saw Anne Boleyn's headless body walk his halls. Others said he heard the voices of executed men begging for justice. He began locking himself away, surrounded only by priests and physicians. The court was haunted, by ghosts, but mostly by the king himself. Henry rewrote laws to control succession, changing heirs like pieces on a chessboard. Edward, Mary, Elizabeth, he trusted none fully. He feared being remembered as a failed patriarch. Each time illness struck, he imagined plots to seize the throne. His final years were marked by accusations, arrests, and endless executions. He grew violent with his physicians, accusing them of poisoning him. He stopped trusting food, water, even prayer. At times, he spoke in Latin to no one. What began as political strategy had devolved into madness. Those who served him now feared him more than loved or respected him. By 1546, Henry's court was a palace of silence. Jesters were dismissed. Music was banned. The once great Renaissance monarch now ruled in shadow, tormented by past crimes, ghosts of the beheaded, and visions no physician could cure. The tyrant's mind was crumbling, and no sword could protect him from himself. Henry VIII's final days were filled with torment. His body was failing, but his pride remained intact. He refused to admit he was dying. Bedridden and bloated, unable to rise or speak clearly. He gasped for breath as the end approached, surrounded by fear, silence, and the stench of slow decay. No one dared say he was dying. It was treason to suggest the king could die. Physicians whispered to each other but avoided truth. Henry's eyes were bloodshot, his skin bruised and yellow. He moaned in pain, gripped by fevers and unable to eat without choking. Death hovered silently nearby. Tradition demanded a priest be called to offer last rites. But Henry refused. He would not confess. His sins, executions, broken vows, religious upheaval, remained unspoken. He feared judgment more than death itself. For hours, he lingered in agony, denying himself peace, his soul trapped in royal pride and spiritual dread. His final queen, Catherine Parr, wept in private. Courtiers watched helplessly. Henry faded in and out of consciousness. One witness claimed he cried out for Jane Seymour, the only wife he claimed to love. Others said he called for God, but no clergyman was brave enough to approach uninvited. Finally, Archbishop Cranmer was summoned, but arrived too late. Henry was barely responsive. Asked for a sign of repentance, he weakly squeezed the archbishop's hand. That was all. No words. No prayer. The king who had rewritten England's religion would die without confession, sacraments, or absolution. On January 28, 1547, just before 3 a.m., Henry VIII died. His death was not peaceful. Gasping, wheezing, his bloated body trembling, he finally fell silent. The court stood still. The tyrant, the reformer, the monster of his final years, was gone, leaving behind fear, silence, and an unfinished legacy. England did not mourn loudly. There was relief, even quiet celebration in some corners. The man who had ruled through fear, who killed wives and split the church, died tormented in flesh and spirit. In the end, even the mighty king could not escape the agonies of conscience and decay. Death did not bring peace to Henry VIII. His massive, decaying corpse presented a macabre problem. Embalmers struggled to prepare his body. His stomach had bloated with gas, his skin turned black, and his limbs stiffened grotesquely. The once mighty king was now a decomposing giant, foul and impossible to preserve. Plans were made for a royal procession to Windsor, where he would be buried beside Jane Seymour. But Henry's coffin, hastily sealed in lead, could not contain his corrupted body. En route, the casket was left overnight in Sion Abbey. There, something grotesque happened, his corpse began to burst. Gas pressure from decomposition caused his abdomen to rupture. Fluids leaked from the coffin, staining the floor. According to chroniclers, dogs licked the king's remains, interpreted by some as divine punishment for his cruelty. Whether fact or legend, it haunted his legacy, whispered for centuries in disgust and dread. His burial was rushed. Few mourned him sincerely. He had ruled with terror, executed queens, and shattered the church. Now, even in death, he brought unease. The ceremony was grand but hollow. Nobles stood stiffly, eyes averted from the bloated tomb that stank beneath the pomp and golden banners. Henry had once planned a magnificent tomb, filled with sculpture, angels, and gold. But it was never completed. He was buried in a plain vault next to Jane Seymour, the one wife he claimed to love. There was no monument, no glory, just a decaying legacy and a collapsing empire. Years later, his burial vault was disturbed. King Charles I's coffin would be buried beside his. Gravediggers discovered Henry's bones, scattered, discolored, disturbed. Even in the grave, the tyrant found no rest. Time and soil had rejected him, just as heaven, some believed, never welcomed him. Henry VIII's legacy is vast, England transformed forever. But his death was grotesque, his body betrayed by the same cruelty he inflicted on others. In the end, not even a king could command death. He died rotting, buried broken, and remembered more for horror than glory.
Thanks for watching Buried Truths. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden corners of history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful stories from history's hidden vault. See you in the next video.